the past. Now, all of a sudden, we've got bombers that are nuclear capable getting attacked with intelligence provided by the West. Does that put him in a spot now where he's got to up the ante? And does that include the possibility of going nuclear on Ukraine? Because if he goes nuclear on Ukraine, Ukraine has got nothing to respond with. But if he bombs, for example, a manufacturing plant in Germany that's making long-range missiles, then Article 5 might be invoked. So what scenarios do you foresee here, Barbara?
Well, he's got the Orishnik, which is, basically a hypersonic missile, which can give as much destruction in a non-nuclear format as a nuclear bomb. And I strongly suspect that that's what we're going to see in his response. There's no Western capability to shoot down these things at this point in time. And, he's used them sparingly in this conflict so far, but he has used them. And I think that's probably going to be the type of response which you're going to see. And it's devastating. Whatever those things hit, basically, if you go back and look on the Russian websites, you'll see that the destruction is horrendous, very precise. In other words, if I want to take out the Ukrainian command, as long as I know where they are, I could at this point with these. So I think he's got a range of options. I think the response will be very severe. And then we'll have to see. Right now, this business with Europe saying it's going to come in and do terrible things to Russia is a farce. There's no capability to actually do that. It requires the United States to come in. If Trump gets hornswoggled into coming in, that's the end of his presidency, which is why we're saying the primary target here is Donald Trump. From the side of the deep state and the people who are actually running this thing. It has nothing to do, in some respects, with Putin and Ukraine.
So you got a question from a viewer here. What's the point of having a nuclear arms treaty with America if they are just going to weaponize it against them?
Well, that's what you see with what the deal is with blowing it up. That's exactly the message which they wanted to convey to people like Iran and other people who we're in negotiations with now.
So there's just going to be no treaties and everything's just going to escalate and the world's going to burn? Is that the direction they want this to go?
Well, there's an answer to this, which, basically LaRouche had a big role in, and Trump is talking about with the Golden Dome. Way back when Reagan came out for the Strategic Defense Initiative, very few people know this history. The idea was to create a shield against nuclear weapons. And if you can succeed in doing that, you give a temporary advantage to the defense in all forms of warfare, obviously. And as technology goes, you're constantly inventing new technologies, and people should continue to do that. That's what mankind does. Basically, it gives you a 2 or 3 year time where you might be able to actually come to some sort of peaceful arrangement for the world as opposed to this. Now, Trump is reproposing that in the form of the Golden Dome. Right now, Russia says that they don't see a problem with that, which is very interesting. It means they're also developing the same capacities. So the answer is, advanced technologies. That's the answer to where we could go, provided we get through some of these crises. And when Reagan was doing the SDI, he offered it to the Russians. LaRouche was the guy who carried that in a back channel to the Russian government on behalf of the Reagan administration. Essentially, the answer of Yuri Andropov at this point was not yet. And they actually played a major role in the attacks on the LaRouche movement at that point in time because of the SDI. But the point is that if we could go with this type of framework, again, coming back to who should actually take down the deep state once and for all, there's 4 nations who, if they actually got together, they could do that, which is the United States, Russia, China, and India. Those, there's a 2018 report out of the House of Lords there, basically targeting exactly that relationship, predicting that that relationship could be devastating for British imperial policy. And again, I emphasize, I'm talking about the city here. I'm not talking about the British people. And the 2018 House of Lords report was called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. And in it, they laid out all of the things which are happening now in terms of the deep state in Britain and everywhere else. We need censorship. We need, basically, there's too many people who believe conspiracy theories. The fact that the population is rising, like in Brexit, is a big threat. We can tolerate one administration of Donald Trump. We can box him in, but we can't tolerate two. This is Sir Richard Dearlove and all of those great nasty people that you suffer there from the Integrity Initiative and other such, places. So that's the ultimate answer, is you need to get the defense in military affairs more powerful than the offense. And you need to end MAD ultimately, which is a crazy doctrine, mutually assured destruction, which holds all of us hostage. I thought it was really scary that when you look at these pictures of the drone attack, you see fail-safe, fail-safe, fail-safe. Now, is that referring to the movie fail-safe, fail-safe? Or is it referring to some kind of, we want it to be working and without failure? The movie, if people remember it, is a horrible movie about uncontrolled nuclear war where there's a mistake made. And essentially what happens is that the United States launches an attack against the Soviets, which can't be called back for various reasons, despite the fact that the president is sitting in the White House and trying desperately to stop the thing, can't stop it, ends up offering New York as something the Soviets can attack and end the conflict. That's like MAD in working its way out. It's crazy. Well, mankind shouldn't tolerate that.
But aren't you seeing parallels with JFK here? He was going to smash the CIA, which is an arm of the deep state, into pieces. And look what happened to him. I'd like to be optimistic, but look at the lessons of history.
That's up to us. That's up to all you guys out there. That's up to us. Okay. The thing that keeps people from being assassinated is the idea that there's 20 more, which will fill in if that happens. It's called, basically informing them that they can't decapitate the head of a movement because it only makes the movement stronger. And that's what we have to offer, provided we act on that notion.
Okay, well said. So viewers, if you've got any questions for Barbara Boyd, we've got about 20 so minutes left. Please put them in the chat. And if you want to subscribe to Barbara's channel, Promethean Action, the channel link is in the live chat. And if you're watching it in replay, it is in the description box. So first question is from Shan. Should Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal be charged with sedition under the Logan Act?
That's something that everybody's floating around. The Logan Act is an ancient statute. It's been used very rarely. I think the far more interesting angle is the one that Larry Johnson's talking about, which is FARA. You remember that's what was used against Michael Flynn and others. They're not acting on behalf of the United States. They're acting on behalf of a foreign government, a foreign power. So that's where I would tend to look if I were sitting in the Justice Department at this point in time. And I'd be particularly looking at who is paying these people in the Ukraine, from the Ukrainian diaspora, which is quite strong. As many people might or might not know, these Ukrainian operations in both Canada and the United States were a huge and cohesive bloc in bringing down the Soviet Union, and are under levels of intelligence control, and played a big role in the first Trump impeachments and in the sort of coup operation, which was run against President Trump in his first term. So that's where I'd be investigating and looking. How much are the Ukrainians paying? How much is backdoor stuff? How much is are people who are in the defense community paying? How much is certain lobbying groups for Israel, for example, which has long been Trump's sort of, piggy bank, involved in this operation also? Is some factions of Israel have major holdings in Ukraine? The whole thing gets very complex when you begin to look at the Ukrainian diaspora and what they've got in Canada and what they've got here, and how they mobilize around support for Ukraine. And I suspect that money has changed hands here, and that's one thing which really should be looked at and examined. Any way that Trump can basically he didn't have any trouble with Blumenthal, who faked his military record about Vietnam in his election, as General Flynn likes to mention. He does have a problem with Lindsey Graham. I believe that Graham is going to get primaried and tossed out in 2026 because MAGA is furious at him.
So you're talking about money changing hands. What's your thoughts on the Biden crime family's involvement with Burisma?
That's interesting, okay, because that in some respects is a protected operation of the Central Intelligence Agency. That's how come they got away with it. If you look at the board of Burisma that Hunter served on at the point that he was serving on that, he was also a member of the National Democratic Institute of basically Project Democracy and the National Endowment for Democracy. Cofer Black, the longtime CIA operative, was also on the Burisma board. The whole idea there was about natural gas, was about all this stuff that's being negotiated in the so-called Ukrainian minerals deal now. And basically the parts of Ukraine which Russia wants is where all of that gas available for fracking actually is, which could, in the view of various Europeans and others, be a big blow to Russian gas interests, obviously, by creating an independent, gas feed from Ukraine. That's what Burisma was all about. It was part of the payoff to Biden for actually being kind of the czar for Ukraine after the 2014 coup. And the reason why that has not been gone after is because it's an intelligence operation, and it was protected all along for that particular reason. So everybody can yell about it, but basically, until you get to the heart of what that was about, you're not going to get anywhere with it.
And what did you think of Hillary Clinton's obsession with Russiagate?
She's crazy. That's where we always start with Hillary. She's nuts. She couldn't stand Putin's macho-ness because she's an ardent, crazy feminist. And she was obsessed with talking about, what position each of their legs were in whenever basically they talked. She was basically a tool of the State Department, rather than being Secretary of State. And, all of these Anglo-American intelligence operations have three kind of prongs in the United States: the Central Intelligence Agency, the State Department, and the Pentagon. And Hillary was in an essential position in the State Department. She hated Putin because he was a manly man and, ran around riding horses with a bare chest and all the other macho things he did, which from her standpoint were a crime against feminism. And she really thought of herself as one of these elites in the United States who were set up in government. And that's what she intended herself to be. And she adopted every single nostrum of the so-called post-war rules-based order. And she's completely freaked out because she spent her whole life actually serving this thing. And now it's disappearing throughout the world as the population says it's all BS. We don't believe it. We don't believe anything you people say anymore. And she blames Russia for that. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of money off the deal, certainly. And if you recall, the looting of Russia took place under the Clinton administration, which, almost reduced Russia to nothing until Putin actually came in.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies. I'll send you a copy if you've got an address. And I did a lot of research on the Clintons. She's an absolute psychopath. All right, so Sal wants to know, can Trump fold up NATO?
If the United States withdrew, yes. And that's something which we would like to see happen. He's asked the question, what the hell is the purpose of this thing? The Soviet Union is dead and gone. Why do we need it? It's simply a collective thing which can only seem to get in trouble, by provoking wars and doing that type of thing. So yeah, I think it's much more important to have, and Trump does too, nation to nation understandings, as opposed to having this block, which comes out of the old Cold War framework, trying to find an identity by launching new wars.
You got a few people asking for your thoughts on the WEF.
Terrible organization, but about to really go down the tube, since Klaus seems to have messed around with the finances and messed around with the perversions which occur apparently when you get to be his age, and seems to have been discovered in that. Their programs have largely failed in the last period. And, what I like to do is refer people to Trump's speeches there, which are right in your face in terms of the models of government, the nation state, which he advocates. He told them the future belongs to the patriots, not the globalists. And he walked in there and said exactly that. So it's an important coordination point for these, elite crazies. So is the Bilderberg Society. So is the Trilateral Commission, which most people don't even realize still exists and is very active. But largely it's a club for central bankers and other wannabes to get together and try and determine the future direction of the world. And it's failing at this point drastically. So that's what it's about. Klaus Schwab comes out of the Harvard seminar series, actually run by Henry Kissinger, and William Yandell Elliott. And that in turn gave us our two horrible boys, both Kissinger and Brzezinski, who were monsters. It's that type of imperial viewpoint which we're going to defeat at this point, and I'm very confident we can do it. But the people got to rise, and they've got to become much, much more competent, much, much more learned, and basically exert their will. And we're seeing that in the United States. We're seeing a huge sort of uprising of the grandest way, where people are awake. They're not going to sleep. They're watching this thing like a hawk. They're expressing themselves, and that's exactly what we want. We're fulfilling Benjamin Franklin's wish here, where he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Well, that depends on everybody out there taking that responsibility to heart.
So when these globalist organizations start to fail, isn't that when we reach a point of maximum danger, because they get desperate and they're likely to do anything?